Hello and welcome to the KAHI Coaches Show, brought to you by Foreman Eye Care on KAHI 104.5 FM and AM 950. My name is Mark the Phantom Lowe, one half of the Placer High broadcast team. I'm the color guy. The play-by-play guy is also here. He's way down at the other end. That's Scott Gordon down there. Scott, we've got kind of a full house here today.
Did you hire security
I
or
did.
bring in the muscle? I feel uncomfortable over here.
I said I'll do a show with Scott, but there have to be two people between us before we do that. To your left is our guy, the man. We've talked to him all the time. He works with me sometimes when you're not around, Jordan Georgeson. Jordan, thanks for dropping by. And to your left, Jordan, we got the man, the very special guest from the Sacramento Bee, 34 years, Joe Davidson. Joe, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you, and that's my age, not how many years I've been there.
Absolutely.
Or allegedly.
As you said, you joined
Give or take.
When you were 10 years old. Guys, we just came to the end of the regular season. Joe, you just did the bracket show the other day as far as the pairings and everything. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to throw this out to you guys because we've watched the entire season of football, and we'll start with you, Scott, as far as maybe an impression, one or two impressions of this season, the 2023 regular season.
Well, first of all, there's nothing like Friday Night Lights, which you and I have talked about.
Yes.
There's some amazing coaches that we've had a chance to talk to and see. But my first impressions is really I feel like I watched two different teams. I watched a team trying to find itself for about 4 weeks, come out of a bye and be a totally different football team, and that's the Placer Hillman. I still think when you get in the playoffs, you need to have more balance. You have to be able to throw and throw when you want to throw and you need to throw, not just as a kind of a sidelight, if you will. But, I've really been impressed, and I've been impressed with how young players can impact the game at such a high level. I mean, you go back to the days when I played, and it was very rare for a sophomore to make the kind of impact like a young man like a Sean Jones or a transfer like a J.J. Willis. So the 6-game winning streak that the Placer Hillman have been on have really been impressive because they haven't been 100%. In terms of health and whatnot. They've really developed a new quarterback. So this is probably one of Joey's best coaching jobs, and I would just have to say, like I said, I feel like I watched two different teams, the one that was trying to find itself for 4 weeks and really a team that found itself and has an identity now.
Yeah, and we have had a great time doing the games this season and meeting all the characters that we've met, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Jordan, you got extended coverage this year, covering way more teams than you did, and you've been telling us about some teams that you've seen. What has impressed you the most during this regular season?
I have to say that what impressed me the most with this season is 12 Bridges. I mean, I knew going into this year they were going to be a good team, but I still thought the Pioneer Valley League was really going to be kind of a race between Sutter and Colfax, and maybe 12 Bridges kind of in that mix with Colfax for second. But the Raging Rhinos, I knew they were confident going in. When I did my season previews, I talked to their quarterback, Whit Cruz, and I said, what's the goal this season? And I was expecting to hear, the basic, hey, we want to win a league title, we want to compete for a section title. And he said, we want to go 15-0. And I was like, 15-0. And he goes, last year we got eliminated in double overtime to the eventual state champion, and it was a game that we should have won. We want to go 15-0. And I was like, all right. And, I saw their confidence grow and grow each week. 8 of their 10 games have been blowouts. They won a slugfest at Sutter, a slugfest at Colfax, which is a team better than their 6-4 record, and they're sitting at 10-0 in the top seed in their second varsity season. And, as Scott said, when he played, it was, sophomores weren't making the impact they are. And I mean, even when I played high school, which was just 10 years ago, first and second year varsity programs weren't getting 1 seeds and going undefeated, with their first senior class. And that team has really impressed me. And, I've heard people, living in Lincoln especially, I've heard rumblings where people are like, do you think they're a section championship team? I go, not only are they a section championship caliber team, this is a team that is good enough to win a NorCal title and go to a state title. Now, there's some roadblocks in the way to that, but it's a team that has the talent to do that by any means necessary.
Now, Joe, you're our special guest, so I'll ask you a two-part question. First of all, obviously you have your eye on the entire area here, but what has impressed you as far as when you were talking about the Placer County, and I'll ask you about the Placer County and the schools that we mostly cover, and then ask you to expand the area to all the metro.
Well, Phantom, it's great to be here. Good to see you guys, Scott and Jordan. The staying power of the Sierra Foothill League continues to impress me. And, it's top-ranked Folsom. Folsom is going for its 10th section championship since 2010. That's amazing. And the Cordova Lancers, we remember those famed team of the 1970s, had the most dominant run then. What Folsom's done in recent years, in the last 15 years, is just way off the charts. They got all these incoming guys. They get transferred and all that. True, but they're still rooted in the youth football foundation. That's where those kids learn to block and tackle.
The feeder programs, yeah.
Yeah, and back in 2018, I did a big story at midseason. And the story only worked because the coaches went on the record. But the rest of the Sierra Foothill League, Oak Ridge coach, the Rockland coach, the Del Oro coach, they all went on the record and said, we want them out of the league. We want Folsom out of the league, and we want, these blowouts are out of control and too many transfers and all that. Well, it doesn't work that way. You don't just vote somebody out. And Folsom felt like they were ambushed in an all-league meeting. And what's the only option? You got to close the gap.
Yeah.
Get better.
Build
and
up
that's
your
what's
own
happened.
programs, right.
And so in 2021, Rockland belted Folsom at home. Folsom had some injuries. Nobody weeps for the mighty, but you got to have depth. And that snapped a 54-game league winning streak for Folsom. 48 of those in Sierra Foothill League. And then Folsom got the rematch in section finals, blah, blah, blah. And we saw in some of these Sierra Foothill League games this season that Folsom just the other day beat Granite Bay 28-21. Granite Bay's only 5-5, but look at their schedule. Tight game against Folsom and Oak Ridge. It was 14-all, then Folsom pulled away in the fourth quarter. So that staying power is impressive. Let's stick with Placer County. Granite Bay, great coach, Joe Catalico. Old school coach, run the ball. Off tackle, run the ball. It works, and he's done it for years, and they may win a section championship by doing that. He's done it before. Oak Ridge is up in El Dorado Hills. They won a rematch with Folsom in the section finals. Del Oro, great staying power. Jordan's an alum there. We marvel at their great quarterback, Caden Pennick, and all those kind of things. And the rooting section, the communities, that's what – you talk about how cool football is.
Football is great on Friday night.
And I've done this for 30-something years at the B. In the last 5 years, 7 years, is when all the rooting sections got involved.
Right. And that's
really
that we talked about.
And that just adds a totally new layer.
That's something we talked about with Jordan a lot this year, and Scott and I remark on it. And so let's go ahead and make that a topic as far as where's Jordan? You've been around to a lot of different places this year. What's your favorite place to watch football?
I gotta say my
you
favorite
can't say
field,
living room.
No,
I mean,
couch.
but I can do my 12-ounce curls there, and the air condiing.
Nachos right there.
I thought it was understood we were talking on site here.
Yeah.
People. Come on.
If
We're
we're
specific.
talking,
Does he have the camera or not? That big,
He's got somebody to carry it for him. Yeah.
exactly. If we're talking, just backdrops, the landscape, I'd gotta say, look no further than the foothills when you get to Placer and Nevada Union, Colfax. The trees surrounding
Bear River,
the field,
amazing.
Bear River, it almost like a natural bowl. But on the topic of student sections, I think the best single student section I saw this year was Del Oro and Casa Roble. Casa Roble hired a DJ to come DJ for their student section. And I'm like, these guys were having a party over here. I don't even think they know a football game was going on in the background. They were just
party in the
so
USA.
into it. They had,
Yes.
and another one that I got to give a shout out to is Whitney. They brought in like fireworks shooters. I've never seen a student section have pyrotechnics. I don't even know if that's legal to get
don't think
those
you're
in the
supposed to
hands
do
of
that, no.
17-year-olds. But, the fact that we're hiring DJs and shooting off fireworks at student sections compared to when I was in high school, it was a big deal if you made a paper sign for the team to run through. I mean, it's come a long way, but I got to say, I don't think when you get, maybe I sound like a homer, when you get backdrop and student section, I don't think it gets much better than Placer High School.
And there's a theme here, Whitey and everybody. If you have a competitive team, that's all you need. The band will come out. The rooting section will come out. The student activities director will work with the principal and the vice principal and the coach. Get them all out there. And what is it that the administrators, teachers, coaches, fans, parents want? Your kids involved and make the high school
They
home
know where they are
environment.
on Friday nights.
Exactly.
And
it's a vibrant, fun memory feel. And it's like they're all in. Grand High School is a great vibe in Del Paso. Like, it's such a tough area. If you're looking for trouble, you could find trouble. But if you want to go there and have a good time in a football game, great atmosphere. They got a drum line with their students.
Yeah.
You see it in the city schools. You see it way up Highway 50. You see it all through the foothills. You see it through Elk Grove. Everybody gets involved. You see small schools, large schools. I saw Valley High School play a Thursday game last year. Valley struggles to win 1 or 2 games a year.
Yeah.
They played a Thursday game at Casitas River College in South Sac against Natomas. I figured nobody's going to be there. The place was packed because it's high school and something fun, and everybody came out. I'm thinking,
It's the
this is the
community.
way to go.
Yeah. we are at Rio Linda this year, and that's not the place you think about that the fans are into it and everything. And you did get checked for weapons when you went in, although they waved me right through. But
you
Scott,
parked in the wrong spot.
Did you turn in your switchblade?
Well, yeah, they just looked at me and go, no, go on in. Go on in.
Nobody's messing with this guy.
Grandpa, go on in. No, but once the game started, what a great time we had out there, Scott, and what a great rooting section. Everybody was totally into it.
It's a community.
It was.
I will give, and first of all, Joe, I have to thank you on here because what you do for high school football in this area, having grown up where the LA Times was and the Daily Breeze, like you get up Saturday morning and you wanted to read about it, you do a phenomenal job, and you really are a tribute because you not only know the kids, you know the coaches, and you do it year after year. And what I love about high school football more than anything, I made a list of all the 10 coaches we talked to and the opposing coaches. I know we will. But some of these guys had teams that won section championships or won their league a couple years ago, and because of transfers or new schools or things like that, are battling to get 2 or 3 wins. And these guys are still going at it 40, 50 hours a week to try to build a program. They're not departing it. I mean, look at the Lincoln coach. 2 years ago, they win the league. This year, they go 0-10. But he's still putting in the time and the effort. Yeah. He's a great guy, and you know what? He could have just said, that's enough. I'll be a math teacher. I've coached before. But I'm going to give, when you talk about an environment, I'm going to go back to Folsom because Folsom was really the first school, in my opinion, in the area when they went down to Sacramento State to play in the state championship. The entire community, to Joe's point, is there greeting the buses, and the players and the coaches are filming the fans, and then the fans go down and watch it because that, despite what the SFL teams wanted to do, vote them out, that lifted them up. It was almost like Pete Carroll at USC.
Right.
Oregon needed to get better.
They had to lift
Washington
themselves.
had to get better. So you can either try to compete and lift yourself up, or you're just going to go by the wayside. And I think as good as Folsom has been, that's the reason, in my opinion, the SFL is the best football in all of Northern California, top to bottom, just from the top of the league to the bottom. Now, there might be a Sarah or a De La Salle and other teams, but that league is better because Folsom has consistently been better and challenged them to get better. And
that league, the Sarah Foothill League, all public schools. And Sarah of San Mateo has been the #1 NorCal team in the last couple of years, beat Folsom this season 21-14. They're in a private school league. And you know, I champion public schools, and public schools are going to have ups and downs. You know, when they close the gap and all that. And back to what you said about 12 bridges. The norm over the decades is that new schools take it square in the chin for years. You know, a lot of times they go 0-10 because you just don't have anything. You have no foundation.
Yeah, you're the little brother. Yeah.
What Chris Bean, the head coach, has done is one of the most remarkable coaching jobs in the history of this section because you just don't say, "Oh, we'll go 10-0 in our second year." You know, Whit Cruz may say that, but a coach isn't going to say that. So they are pleasantly surprised. But the beauty is, you haven't done anything yet until you get to a section final, and they know it. What great motivation! And that community already backs that school big time. So it's really cool to see. When you start a brand new school, you've got to hire an impact coach, and West Park of Roseville is a relatively new school, did the same thing. Hire Jason Tenner.
He's a good coach.
You've got to have a guy. Yep. I've seen newer schools over the 35 years, and they get a coach, and you go, they hired that guy, and it's a disaster. Mm-hmm. And it takes them years to get going, and you can't make that mistake. And those two newer schools nailed it.
Well, something I wanted to get to in this segment, and Scott kind of mentioned it already, but I think the characters that he and I were most impressed with this year have been the coaches that we run across because we talked to them during the week and we get to know them just a little bit. And it's those coaches that are not working with a lot, like Coach Freeman over at Rio Linda and some of the others that really impress us. And you talk about a community, and Casa in Orangevale, that community has been
Chris
built
Horner,
up, but it was down a little while ago, and he's had to build it up to what you say. And it's the guys, the grinders like a Coach Freeman and some of the other guys that we run into, Scott, that I think that we need to kind of recognize because though they don't really get shouted out. I know you shout out as many people as you possibly can, and you know all the coaches, but some of these guys seem to slip through the cracks, and they're in there grinding for their 2-8 or for their 3-7. You know what I mean? As you say, Valley.
And they are the unsung
and they're the
guys.
And the amount of kids that they impact and influence by what they do just on a 2-8 team is amazing. So those are the guys I think some of the unsung heroes of our sport.
And you can see quick turnarounds.
Oh, absolutely.
Rio Americano of the San Juan Unified, I don't like saying the word district,
You can
San
say
Juan
whatever
Unified.
you want. Say what you like.
Sounds more cool.
Yeah.
Kids are about cool. We're about
say
cool.
whatever you like, sir.
But San Juan, but Rio Marcano is an academic boot camp and hasn't had a really good team in 30 years. Reed Sanders in his third year, they one win a couple of years ago, 2 wins last year. Gets the numbers way up, the varsity numbers up into the 60s. They're 8-2, so you can turn it around, and it's because those coaches are tireless people.
To your point, the biggest year where kids drop out of football is between your freshman and sophomore year, because a lot of kids go out your freshman year because you want to meet a bunch of friends, and then you drop off your sophomore year. If you start your program like Folsom does, or some of the other schools we're talking about, the feeder programs going in where you got 15, 20, 25, you don't see the degradation in the programs. And a guy like Davy Johnson at Ponderosa, when we talked to him last year, he basically could have said, I just want a freshman team and a varsity team. But he said, I want to offer 3 levels because my sophomores are not ready to go play Placer. My sophomores are not ready to go play at Del Oro in a non-conference. So you know what I need to do? I need to develop my program. So I got to take – how many people do you know in today's day and age where you get instant gratification would say, I need to take a hit this year? I might only win 2 or 3 games.
Right.
But to build my freshman program, to build my JV program, and we did the JV game was a phenomenal game.
Absolutely.
It was a 1-point game. Now, varsity game was a running clock game. You know why? Because he sat out 5 of his starters because they were hurt, and he refused to pull up the sophomores because he didn't want to hurt their chance to play in high school and their love for the game moving up. So that's a huge piece that you have to continue.
Jake Messina,
Oakmont.
first-year coach at Oakmont here in Placer County in Roseville, right here in this very extended neighborhood. 0-10, but he did the same thing. I want 3 levels, and let's develop those. Very competitive on the freshman, JV. We've got reinforcements coming. Realignment's going to put them in a more competitive league. But those are the unsung guys. And you think about going down Highway 50. Ponderosa in the 70s was a powerhouse and had some good teams in the 80s. Still have good enrollment. They have the right coach in place. Then you just come down Highway 50 and you get to Folsom, monster. It used to be Cordova that was a monster. So
you got Vista there now, too.
It's exactly right.
So.
There you go. That's a look at the 2023 season. We're back to talk to the Placer head coach, Joey Montoya. He's our special guest coming up next on the KAHI Coaches Show, FM 104.5, AM 950, your voice of the foothills.
Have questions about your vision? Aren't seeing things as clearly as you were before? For all your eye care needs, look at Foreman Eye Care. Dr. Dan Foreman is a board-certified cataract and refractive surgeon and has been in practice for over 25 years. You can find him online at foremaneyecare.com or call the office at 530-885-3767. Foreman Eye Care, proud sponsor of Placer football.
Welcome back to the KAHI Coaches Show, FM 104.5, AM 950, your voice of the foothills. Mark the Phantom Lowe, Scott Gordon, Jordan Georgeson, our special guest, Joe Davidson. And now, guys, it's time to talk about the playoffs because the playoffs are amongst us. Scott, I guess we start off with Placer getting the 4 seed, as I think we both thought they would do in Division 4.
Yeah, they did. I mean, and obviously you look at that, and most likely West Park is going to be their first opponent in a quarterfinal game, be a rematch of a game we saw just a couple weeks ago. I think it'll be a decidedly different game, not in terms of outcome, but in terms of players on the field, because I do think West Park might have their starting quarterback back, might have their starting linebackers back. They've been punched in the mouth twice, two years in a row by Placer, and I think if you're Joey Montoya, yeah, you're happy you have West Park, but you want to beat the same team that's your rival 3 times. That's not easy to do. And we all know what Placer's going to want to do, and that's going to grind out the football game, move it down the field. And really, they were going in to be up 28-0 if it wasn't for that Weston Wade strips fumble. So we know what Joey Montoya's plan is going to be. He's going to have to tinker with it a little bit. West Park's going to come after him with a different shot there. But really, Escalon's the number 1 seed in that whole bracket. But I think the most interesting thing is the fact that you're going to have a rematch, essentially, of the Foothill Valley League Championship in your quarterfinal matchup to really line things up. And then the winner of that game, you got to go through Escalon to try to get by there. So how beat up will they be? But I do like how they did it this year, where everybody knows what bracket they're going to be in. So, last year if Elk Grove, Jesuit, like the winner went to Section 1, the loser went to Section 2. This year you knew who you were playing against, you knew what you were playing for, and I'm happy that Placer got rewarded not for the tough schedule and starting 0-4, but running out 6 straight victories at the end.
Absolutely. We'll talk more about that game, obviously, next week on the KAHI Coaches Show. Jordan, I know that you have some thoughts about Placer, but also the team that you've been championing, the 12 Bridges, they came out pretty well seeding-wise.
Yeah, they did. They got the 1 seed. You know, I did my interview last week with Will DeBoard, kind of talking about the what goes into making these brackets, and I asked him straight up. I said, "Hey, don't give anything away, but I want to ask you about this 12 Bridges Casa Roble, conflict right now." And he said that he anticipated that was going to be a pretty long argument on Sunday morning when they were making the brackets. Now, I wasn't in the room when they made them, so I can't say if it was a long argument or not, but I know both teams had a great case. 12 Bridges,
Absolutely.
if you go 10-0, that's a great case right there. 10-0. We won all 10 of our games. 8 of them were running clocks. We had 2 slugfests against Sutter and Colfax, who were both very good teams. And then Casa Roble, their case, we're 9-1. Our only loss is to Del Oro. We scheduled a tough non-league. We can't do anything about our league. And I think what it came down to is, 1, the 0 in the loss column for 12 Bridges. And also, if you look at the Pioneer Valley League, 6 of the 7 teams made the playoffs. And if you look at 12 Bridges' schedule, I think the only teams that they played that didn't make the playoffs were Northgate in the Bay Area and El Dorado. Whereas Casa Roble had, I think, 5 or 6 wins against playoff teams versus, 8 with 12 Bridges. And yes, those 5 or 6 may have been more impressive playoff teams than the teams 12 Bridges beat, but I think 10-0 against 8 playoff teams beats 9-1 against 6 playoff teams.
You've got to win. Here's the deal. The way things work now is the first round you get a bye, and then you get you're going to have a tough quarterfinal matchup.
Right.
I mean, look at Division II, and I know you're going to get more with Joe and everybody, but I mean, look at you had Rockland and Oak Ridge really kind of switch spots, 2 and 3, because they played it in this great game. You got Del Oro playing probably Jesuit. You've got to beat good football teams.
Right.
So really, it is nice when I got the 1 seed. Ask Placer how happy they were they got the 1 seed last year. They got upset by Wood Creek. You got to win football games. And so for the team that gets the 2, you get fired up because you thought you deserved the 1. You got to show it on the field. And if you're the 1, you can't really rest on your laurels because it's not like you get a bye in your first game. It's the quarterfinals. You could win and go. I mean, you could win that league and end up going home. It's tough.
Joe, you did the brackets show yesterday. Usually, you're tired the next day from carrying your partner. I know that. I've watched a couple of those. But anything that surprised you? I know there's a lot of teams to name and a lot of guys to talk about, but you do a great job. Anything that jumped out at you right away?
I would have argued for Casa Roble as a top seed in Division 5. Jordan brought up a good point. We both covered that game. We were certainly most impressed with the DJ for the rooting section, but the difference maker
on that.
Exactly. The difference maker in that game was Del Oro's dynamic quarterback. But it was a 7-3 game at half, Casa Roble leading. I thought it was a great ambitious scheduling thing, kind of gauge yourself. But I think Jordan is right where the 12 Bridges' league was deeper. And then there's also the argument, well, where's 12 Bridges is brutal non-league game. Well, they didn't anticipate being 10-0. So what you do when you're a brand new school is you schedule teams where you can compete, and they will certainly up their schedule because they're not going anywhere. The JV team's doing well. They got youth feeder programs and all that. And, another interesting argument was if Oak Ridge beat Rockland in El Dorado Hills on Friday in a Sierra Foothill League finale, Oak Ridge probably would have locked up the number 2 seed in Division 1. Why is that a big deal? Because by losing that game, Oak Ridge slips to 3. Central Catholic of Modesto, big-time powerhouse, won 20 section championships, a record, is now the 2 seed, which means if the seedings hold, Oak Ridge has to go down there to play. And what Oak Ridge really wants is a rematch with Folsom. Folsom's beat them 20 consecutive times, which is remarkable. A lot of those games have been tight and all that. But I think otherwise the seedings were about right.
Yeah.
It's the Sierra Foothill League has all but 1 team in. Whitney didn't get in. Grant was a second-place finisher in the Metro League, but the clear number 1 seed in Division 3. Wood Creek's this clear number 2 team in Division 3 with its best team in school history. So I think mostly everything played out.
Joe, what do you think about Del Oro? I just got to ask you because obviously last year we saw Granite Bay go 1-4 in league and end up making it to the section championships. You talked a little bit before about Folsom losing to Granite Bay in Rockland, and then they got healthy, and then they won the championship, beat De La Salle. I mean, Del Oro 5-0, and then they go 1-4. That potential quarterfinal game at Jesuit, a team that runs a veer and a team that's wide open. I mean, when you look at Del Oro, what do you make of them right now?
Well, and see, that's a great point. Mike Mabin's an alum coach, and Laguna Creek. I saw Laguna Creek the other night just got buffaloed by Grant, but earlier this season, Laguna Creek and Monterey Trail played to double overtimes, like 49-47. So they have speed and athletes. That's going to give Del Oro problems, especially if Del Oro's got injury problems or anything like that. Anything goes in the playoffs. But Jesuit games in the playoffs, they're still 95 degrees. It could be 62 degrees everywhere. I don't know why. It's always miserably hot out there at Jesuit.
There's literally no trees anywhere around.
Yeah.
It just sun goes, yes.
And the Sierra Foothill League will find out in the coming years with realignment. But, no, that's brutal. And so Del Oro, Del Oro it earned its playoff position. Only one league win. Well, let's see how everybody else would do in that league, and gets a home game, which is great.
Yep.
But a second round game at Jesuit on a day is a fabulous example. And can Jesuit handle that Sierra Foothill League toughness and might and strength?
That starts
the Delta
next year,
League was not that strong this year.
No.
Top heavy with Jesuit, Elk Grove, and then a big drop off. And let's say Del Oro keeps winning and maybe runs into Rockland. How cool would that be for a Placer County Rumble in a semifinal with the potential of taking on the winner of St. Mary's versus Granite Bay? And Granite Bay's not going to bother anybody. They're 5-5. Have you seen that running game?
Yeah, we know Granite Bay.
Have you seen their
Have
schedule?
you seen the triple overtime Rockland game?
Exactly.
Let's not forget about Manteca in D2 as well, too. I mean, that's another team. They beat Granite Bay 15-0 earlier this
season. And Manteca did it without their star running back. He had an elbow injury. He's back now. So just can't imagine. I mean, that could be a likely rematch down there. So what we're saying, basically, folks, is get your playoff tickets. The playoffs are fun.
Well, what we're saying is, I mean, obviously we know the favorites. I know that we talked about Del Oro. Their first game was against Intercom this year, and they beat them, I think, 50-34. But you knew Intercom was good. I think they're a 5 seed.
Right.
And is there any? I think they are a threat to do something in that division. Are there any other teams that are outside maybe those top 4 that you guys think? And Jordan, I'll start with you. Any guys that outside the top 4 you think might make some noise in any division?
There's a few. I really think people need to keep an eye on West Park. I mean, that is a team that went 8-2, and you know what? If Placer didn't beat them head to head, they were probably going to be the 3 seed, not the 4 or not 4. And that's a team that I think is going to be scary. I think Roseville is a team with a guy like Joel Bradley, how quick he is, how
wide
explosive
receiver.
he is.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
I think that's a team that can do it. And you know what? A team that we saw, Phantom, and like we say, weird things happen when you play there. Nevada Union getting a home game as an 11 seed because Kimball didn't fill out the paperwork. That's an 11 seed that I would not be shocked to see pull an upset. And I mean, I'm not saying Nevada Union's going to find themselves in a semifinal, but
the coffee
weird
will be any
things,
better?
The coffee,
Sorry.
that's what it's going to come down to. If the coffee's not better, Kimball wins that game. But
all right. What's the coffee reference?
I
so
don't know.
I called the
Quickly.
game with Phantom up at Nevada Union, and I ordered a cup of coffee for the game. And what they served me was just burnt bean water, I think. And it was one of the worst cups of coffee I had. I still drank it, but
of course
it upset me for a long time.
Oh, so he's gonna pin that on why his broadcast was kind of wonky.
No, well, I know we've talked about why his broadcast was wonky, but that's a team, Nevada Union. I thought the way things were working out that they might get themselves a home game anyway. They got one strange against a Kimball team that's won 5 games, but an incredibly difficult schedule. So they are the 6th seed. So Scott, who do you think maybe could surprise us from outside the top 4?
Kind of reminds me of the NCAA tournament where a 5 always beats a 12. I'm looking at Granite Bay right here as a 5-12, and they get a rematch against Manteca in the second round if they get out of their first round. Joe Catalico, I love everything about him. He calls the offense, he calls the defense. He doesn't wear a headset. They do
and
it
no
an
laminated
old-school
play
way.
sheet.
And he's got 2 of the best running backs in and
Absolutely.
Carter Jackson. They're always good on defense. They're always sound. We saw him play Del Oro at Del Oro last year and get revenge. I look at this, and I really think they could go all the way and play a team like Rockland in the championship on there. So if I had to pick a 5 that makes a run, to me it's Granite Bay, and it wouldn't surprise me at all.
And Joe, you watch all these teams. What strikes you? Maybe you guys talked about this on your show. What strikes you outside the top 4 in any division?
Well, I'm going to go back to the first one you mentioned, the Income Tigers, located in Natomas Unified. The school's right there by Arco Arena. Dynamic athletes. Dual threat quarterback Ricky Cole's got 39 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, got 10 more rushing, only a junior. His position coach is a longtime area coach who's known for offense, and that's Justin Reber. The head coach is Reggie Harris, known for defense. Their 9-game winning streak. Loss was the opener, as you mentioned, at Intercom against Del Oro. I think it was a 1-touchdown game at the half. But then Caden Pinnock did Caden Pinnock things later and pulled away, so there's no slouch there. And another big win for Inderkum was 20-15 over Wood Creek, the number 2 seed in Division 3. So Inderkum, let's say if the seedings hold, Inderkum gets past Pleasant Grove. Inderkum at Monterey Trail a week from Friday is a
What a
whopper.
game.
Is
What
a
a
great
game.
game.
Yep.
And I could see Inderkum winning that game, and then they get a semifinal showdown with Folsom, which is exactly what they geared their whole season for.
There you go. That's what you want. All right, so we've got maybe our favorites. I think we know what the favorites are. We've got some underdogs. And we talked about this on our show earlier in the season with Jordan and with Scott. We picked our player of the year in the section, and I think the season's over now. So I want to know if you guys have one or two choices for now that we've seen everybody. Who are your choices for player of the year? Scott, we'll start with you.
Well, I started with Carter Jackson at the beginning of the season, and I might have to make a slight change to a guy like I'm going to take one of yours, Cole Owens at Casa Roble. I just think for what he's done for that Division 5 team, and just got an offer from UC Davis. He is such an electric player that can really change the game on the stop of a dime. And for them to go 9-1, they don't do that without him. Carter Jackson's still great, but he's got a little bit more complementary players to go with him.
What do you think, Jordan?
I think a lot of people are going to expect me to go with my alma mater here, but I'm not. I'm going to keep on the 12 Bridges train. Go Nathan Crawford right here. 347 yards and 5 touchdowns against Colfax.
In a close game.
In a close game. And I think, if I can fudge his numbers, I think he has 9,000 rushing yards and 180 touchdowns this year or something like that.
I thought you were going to fudge him.
It's just what he's doing is incredible. And, it's insane because that whole 12 Bridges team is so good. And I still think, without him, this team is still 8-2 or 9-1. But with him, he is a big reason they're 10-0 right now. And he is just put this team on his back and put games away time in and time out. And to me, I got to give it to Crawford.
And Joe, you talked earlier about, you guys put polls out. People vote every week on Player of the Week. Fabulously successful. Before I ask you if you're going to name a Player of the Year, are there a couple of guys who surprised you this year? You have a pretty good finger on the pulse of all this stuff. A couple of guys who really made a big jump this year that you weren't expecting?
We do have a Sacramento Bee Player of the Year poll we just posted an hour ago.
Oh, okay.
When I looked lost looking at the phone and had the guys that we've mentioned. Entering the season, I had a voting poll, which is for fun and for debate, and who's the best player entering the season. We did not have Ryder Lyons on that list, and he's the sensational sophomore quarterback who didn't start any varsity games last year because he was kicking butt on JV. That guy, he's my leading candidate right now, and we will decide our players of the year over the decades at the B after the playoffs, because the playoffs are the games that really matter. And you could really, there could be a guy who storms out of nowhere. Let's say Baylor Kelly or Sean Jones gets to a NorCal final, and they're just going, well, maybe you look at that. Playoff results matter. Let's say,
remember Daniel Graves? He lost to Grant, but he came back and won the championship.
2010.
The Gatorade Player of the Year.
That's exactly right. At Folsom 2010. So I'm going with Ryder Lyons. He's a sophomore quarterback. He has some of maybe the best footwork I've ever seen for a high school quarterback around here. And does that sound like an overstatement? He's only a sophomore. I saw Jake Browning. Any coach at any level said, boy, if you can have footwork and it extends plays, we see that with Caden Penning. When these guys do that at an exceptional level, every play is still a play. And he's big and he's strong and Ryder Lyons, and he wants to do well. And he got blown up in an early game at Sarah, number 1 NorCal team, Sarah, blew him up on a play. And he went to the sideline and he laid down for a moment. He's back in the next play. That is one tough dude, and it's going to be on his shoulders to keep this train rolling, and he wants to do it.
There you go. We are out of time on the KAHI Coaches Show. Thanks to our special guest, Joe Davidson. Thanks a lot, Joe. Jordan Georgian, of course, my partner, Scott Gordon. We'll be back next week for the KAHI Coaches Show. That's what you've been watching on KAHI 104.5 FM and AM 950, your voice of the foothills. Good night, everybody.